well, I will call this meeting to order. So thank you everyone for being here. Just quick kind of housekeeping for today. We will have time at the end for public comment. We'll save some time back then so that everyone can kind of comment on everything that was heard. We've got tentatively planning two sessions kind of scheduled, so we're not necessarily today trying to solve everything and get everything figured out. But just a little bit of background, I think everyone knows we had a situation that kind of prompted wanting to sit down, look at just overall how our animal control is currently set up. A lot of everyone probably knows that we had to switch over to having it done in-house last year. Waterloo's estimated cost went up significantly, so we looked to bring it in-house. And so I think really for today is just helping us kind of talk through how's it set up now, how's it working, what are our numbers looking at. And then ultimately the goal from this group will be a recommendation to council on, is the path forward, keep it as it is within the city, but do some additional training? Is it bring on some specific animal control officers? Is it contract with someone else to do it? So at this point, just really open-ended and wanting to see where we're at and what's the best way forward. Anybody have any questions or before we jump in? Okay. So really, yeah.
You want to do a quick intro around the table?
Yeah, so quick, do a roll call just so we got for the record who all's here. Good, good.
Darrell Cruz, Council, Third Ward.
Anna Chrisman, at large.
Christy Gardner, Executive Director of the Cedar Bend Humane Society. Thank you.
Nick Hedrick, Cedar Bend Board President.
Joanne Cole, Cedar Bend Humane Society Vice President. Okay. And how do you spell Cole? Koweil. Never would have guessed that.
I was gonna say.
Not even close.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know if you care who I am, but I'm Katie and I'm with the city.
We do care.
Ron James, City Administrator.
Gil Schultz, Council Ward 1.
Craig Birdie, Director of Public Safety.
Mark Howard, Chief of Police. And then just formality, so the group that will be actually making the recommendation will be the council members who are attending, so they'll be kind of making and voting on the formal recommendation later, so. All right, but otherwise, want to do some just quick introductions. I know we've got some new faces in the room. Just go through and just, you kind of already introduced yourself, but.
What do you?
Who are you, Darrell?
Who are you?
Oh.
Don't need long.
Caught me off guard. Originally from Northeast Iowa, little school at Turkey Valley up there. Been first in Cedar Falls in the 70s, going to Hawkeye Community College, and eventually UNI. Graduated with a degree in finance and economics, financial planner. What else I do? Council. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
I'm Hannah Chrisman, currently sitting on the at-large seat on the council. And felt that this was a pretty important topic, and so volunteered to be a part of this task force.
I'm Christy Gardner. I'm the Executive Director of the Cedar Bend Humane Society. I've been there for about 25 years.
Nick Hedrick, and like I said, I was the Board President. I've been with Cedar Bend for several years now. I'm also, my day job is the GM for the Holiday Inn and BMW Event Center in Cedar Falls.
And I am Joanne Cole. I have been on the board of Cedar Bend, serving in several officer roles over the years for about 15 years. I also am a branch manager and do hiring for all the tellers in the region for Viridian Credit Union.
Ron James, I've been with the city about 18 years, various roles, but in the city administrator role for the last 8.
Gil Schultz, I'm council for Ward 1, which is, we're sitting in it. And I am the retired safety manager for John Deere for the Waterloo Works and adjunct at the engineering at UNI, and a 1970-something graduate of Cedar Falls High School. So I've been around here for a while.
Craig Birdie, Director of Public Safety. I work for the city. I've been here 34 years, kind of a traditional police department. Worked my way up to the police department and was formerly the police chief, and currently Director of Public Safety, and lived in Cedar Falls since '91.
Mark Howard, been with the city about 18 years. I was a Waverly cop for 10 years before that. Grew up here, graduated in '87 from CF. Master's degree from UNI. I'm also a UNI professor. So thanks,
How are
everyone.
you?
I'm Danny. Danny Mayer, Cedar Falls, grew up here. Cedar Falls schools, went to UNI, got my degree there, went down to Kansas City for just a little bit shortly after there. Came back up to the area and working in economic, community development, all nonprofit work in the area ever since, so. All right, so to kick it off, asked Director Birdie to kind of just give a quick presentation where we're at, current policies, practices and everything for animal control, what our numbers are looking at to kind of help us set the stage for how everything's running now.
All right. Yeah, I was just gonna give kind of a quick history, just bring up to where we are now, and then when it gets in the nuts and bolts of what's going on now, most of that will be Chief Howard. So just some history. So in my 34 years, as I look back on animal control, there were times the police division did animal control. There were times the Cedar Bend Humane Society provided animal control. There was times that the city of Waterloo provided our animal control. And there was a time in there where there's even a hybrid where City of Waterloo provided the animal control, but the Humane Society provided the animals will always stay out there. We go through a wide range of animal related calls. When the calls were done by an outside agency before we were doing them, the average is about 300 animal calls a year and about 150 dead animal calls a year. As we do animal control calls, the numbers are higher, but the reason for that is when an outside agency does it, there's certain things that they're only called in for because they need their expertise, where the police are probably already dealing with some of the more minor things. And a good example of that is barking dog, things like that. So when Chief Howard goes through some animal control numbers, it's all things animal control. So just anything we had to do dealing with animals. Back in 2013, so if you back up about 10 years ago, our animal control costs were $86,000 a year. Fast forward, last year they were $135,000. And so really what prompted where we are today is we had an agreement where Waterloo was doing our animal control. The animals are staying out the Cedar Bend Humane Society. And in the fall, Waterloo proposed going from $135,000 basically up to $615,000 because they were going to make some significant changes. So we talked about it internally with the city. I made a presentation to the council in January or in the fall. And the decision was made that, and then also, if they would increase up to 615,000, they would no longer be in the business of dead animal pickup. So it was a significant increase, 400 or 500% increase. We made the decision that we were going to do animal control in-house. And some of the things we did related to that was a presentation to City Council in January. Chief Howard worked with the city attorney on some ordinance changes throughout the spring. Chief Howard worked with Christie a lot through, the changes and things like that. We had some training provided by Cedar Bend Humane Society. We purchased equipment, modified a van. But Chief Howard is the subject matter expert in terms of animal control, in terms of he tracks all the bite cases, any quarantines. He's that link to the Cedar Bend Humane Society. So Chief Howard will go through the number of calls we had here in the first 6 months, the type of calls, the type of employee hours that it took, and what the ordinance changes involved. And then I know that Public Works, either Chase Rogge or Brian Heath will go over how dead animal pickup was going. So that's kind of the overview, kind of looking back over 30 years, where we get to where we are now.
Okay, so our CAD system isn't the greatest, so I have to do this by hand. But what I did is I went through each week, number of calls per week since January 8th through Monday of this week. And, for the 3 shifts, I will say that, and this is a rough figure because I would have to go back through them by hand again and do it, but roughly between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. Right at, as of this week, as of Monday morning, or Sunday night, at midnight, we've had 520 animal calls that the officers have responded to, in relationship to, in relationship to, if you look way on the right, 2023, we had 309 calls. That's including 189, DOA calls. We don't track those anymore. Those go straight to Public Works. So when they say 520, I think I counted 5 that were actual dead animal calls that were included in that. So instead of, so really 2023, we're looking at roughly 130 police calls where we went on animal control calls. That was for January to January. compared to the 520 we've already gone on this year. 2022, same thing, 303 calls, but 137 of those were also dead animal calls. So we're, obviously looking to exceed that, possibly tenfold by the time we get to January of where we're at. I also went through each call and added up the minutes officers were on these calls, for each week, roughly 14,800 calls for the year so far. If you spread that out through the weeks or divide it out through the weeks, we're looking at about 7.72 hours weekly that patrol officers are spending actually on animal control calls.
Was that 7.72 per officer?
No, per total,
Yeah.
total, sir, 8, that kind of that, 8 a.m., or excuse me, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. timeframe, so 2 shifts. The long calls, the calls that are taking up our time that didn't 13, 15 years ago that the director talked about, is there's a lot of new rules for bite calls. There's reporting that has to be done to the health department, the Blackhawk County Health Department. So we've had to create, and Christie's been a huge help to me when we first started this, as far as getting these forms changed, getting them to making them Cedar Falls forms. And getting all the reports done. So some of these reports, some of these animal calls, even though they're simple bite calls, are taking 2-3 hours for officers to complete. But statistic wise, that's where we are so far. And I think where we struggle is knowledge. We did go through training. We have monthly in-service training. Cedar Bend was kind enough to come out in February and attended all 3 of our trainings, where every officer was able to attend the sessions of training. Please understand, some of these officers are not animal people, and some of this was their first exposure to cats, to dogs, which is what we trained on. There's a lot of growth to go and a lot of education that has to continue with these types of calls. We also realized that we needed to change ordinances. We'd had a meeting back in January where we met with Cedar Bend. One of the things that was suggested was a bond upon appeal. Currently, we have a dog that's been in our custody now for several months. And it's really, I don't want to get into it, but it's through an appeal process that has gone now to district court being appealed. That dog continues to remain in Cedar Bend's custody. It's very frustrating, and we've talked several times. It's very sad. So we want a bond element to that where to file that appeal, there has to be a bond posted before that appeal can be. So that was one of the ordinances. The other ordinance was suggested by Christie again, was remove. We had always been different than Waterloo, and we allowed 5 days before a dog could be adopted out if no owner was known. And her suggestion was 3 days. We have that ordinance was changed by council. It is down to 3 days now. So that took effect July 1. And then also a redemption fee. Again, Christie was able to show us how, it does decrease repeat offending. And if you're an officer out on patrol and you're grabbing the same dog every night because the same neighbor's calling because it's in their yard doing whatever to their bushes, if we can slow repeat offending down, that's a good thing. So we passed a redemption fee. That fee was set in the fee schedule. The city set that at $50. That is collected if we catch a dog, we have a chip reader. If we can read their chip, get hold of the owner, we bring them to the police department. They pay us directly the $50. We release them. If there is no chip, the dog is supposed to, or the animal, excuse me, is supposed to automatically go out to Cedar Bend, because we also passed a mandatory chipping law, where Cedar Bend will chip that dog, and I believe it's $40, also at the cost of the owner, on top of the $50 redemption fee, and then Cedar Bend keeps, I believe it's 2% of the handling fee, or at least that's what we had discussed at the time. The contract is still being amended to fit all that. So really, those are the ordinances. So we took the 5 days to 3 days. We added the redemption fee, and then we added the mandatory chipping, which helps, really helps us get dogs back to their owners. We learned a lot. We learned a lot about feral cats. There's been a lot of conversation about feral cats and some confused people when we let cats go right back in the neighborhood if they've got a notched ear. But that is from our training, and that is a program that I've read about after learning about it, and it is effective. It does control population. And so we're glad to take part in that, but sometimes people, some rumors get thrown out there that we're just throwing cats in woods and letting them go, and that's just not true. So, but we are doing what we can with what we have. So that's the ordinances we passed. There's the statistics we're at as of, like I said, as of Monday. So.
I've got a couple more things, Mayor, that might help.
Can
Uh,
I ask a question? Mark, on those numbers, are they more domestic animals as opposed to raccoon, possum? How do we deal with that, or?
So we made it clear that we really don't want to deal with wild animals, from the beginning. Our only recourse on an injured wild animal is to euthanize it most of the time. If you've got a sick raccoon, that's what we're gonna do with it.
Sure.
But I noticed going through them, and I would have to literally go back through all of them by hand, and to actually divide that out. But no, we've helped. My gosh, we had a lady who had a squirrel in her driveway that was dead and didn't want to touch it. So we went out, put it in a bag and put it in her trash for her. I mean, so we go, these are just numerous different types of
Okay,
calls. And the officers are very willing to do that. I've yet
Sure.
to hear somebody say, nope, I'm not going to help.
I had an experience as a landlord. That's one thing I didn't mention. I've been a landlord for quite a while. I had a raccoon in a window well, and I called the Cedar Bend, and this is probably 10 years ago, maybe thereabouts. And they come with a snare and they grab a leg and the head and pull it out and let it go, and off it runs. I mean, you're not doing that.
Oh, we do that. We
Oh, you
bought,
do? Okay.
under Christie's guidance, we bought some really nice catch poles. That was part of our training on how to use them, where to
Okay.
catch you. We do. It's a lot of times for something like that too, if you got a 2x6 sitting there, if you just slide it down in there,
Yeah,
they'll crawl right
well,
out.
And then just leave it alone.
Yep, just
Yeah.
leave it alone. We're growing, we're learning.
Right.
It's just, I really thought the numbers were important. So people see where we are. And how
Well,
much
yeah,
this
I'm
has
just
been-
thinking in real life things. I also had a family of raccoons in my attic, and then at night the babies would come out and play on the roof. And
Yeah, and on something like that, Daryl, we're gonna refer you to an expert. I'm not gonna
Wildlife.
send officers up in an attic.
trapping, whether there's a time of year you trap them, and there's a process, and
Yeah.
you don't want to orphan the babies and all that kind of stuff. So
We-
I learned a lot about it as well through that.
And at least in my time with this, it seems like the wild animal piece is kind of the touchy one, because I think a lot of people expect someone will show up and take care of it, but it sounds like everything I've checked, even from county resources, Waterloo, wild animals usually aren't like raccoons. It's really kind of usually, it seems like if it's healthy wildlife, you kind of let it run its course and do its thing, or if you have to get it professionally removed. But I think there's just been some confusion about what's the expectation of what would typically be done, what wouldn't be done, more so from the public on, what's being provided. And because I know we've heard a lot of the concerns that we're just not providing any animal control, which I think was just a misunderstanding when we did the transition of what was being offered. Did you have a few
I
things?
just had a couple more numbers to help. Just in general terms, our police division does about 20,000 calls for service a year, and our fire division does about 2,000 calls per year. So when you hear Mark say that there's 500 animal calls, the police division is doing always around 19 to 22,000 calls per year. So we always just say 20,000. And then the other thing I was gonna say, our staff, we have 76 sworn officers, 26 assigned to the fire division, the other 50 are assigned to the police division. So the bulk of the training and the people doing animal calls is all people on the police division, probably 99% of it. And so if it's 50 bodies, you've always got a couple in the police academy. So really you're talking about 40, 45 people. And when we provide training, we need to provide it to everybody, because short of our detectives, anybody else who's on patrol will get dispatched to animal calls. So we can't just select a couple people on a shift and make them the animal experts, because when they're on days off, everybody's on a rotating schedule. So all the supervisors, all the officers on a rotating schedule. So you've really got to train everybody, because you don't know who's going to get called to those calls. So.
And can you go in just for everyone's knowledge on the training, what specifically is done? What level of training has each officer received? So when they go in the field, how well prepared are they?
I defer to Mark.
Well, I'd be very intro, very minor. You have to understand that we only have so much in service, and the more of it's focused on this, the less police training is going into effect. And that's just the dead nuts of it. If we do 4 hours of police service in the morning and we spend 4 of it doing animal control, that's 4 hours of police in service that didn't take place. So I think we did an hour.
With each shift.
With each shift, back in, and it was good. It was very informative, very hands-on. But by no means has it made anybody an
Yeah,
expert.
yeah.
So, and, we have Christie's phone number. We have emails out to supervisors where they know her number. They are to reach out to Cedar Bend, for that expertise when you do have those questions.
So I think that was one of the big concerns I've heard, is that the training, it's like you said, 1 hour, even if it's a great hour, it's still only 1 hour. And it's a lot to put on people, that expectation to be able to handle what it seems like are often some pretty complicated situations with just an hour of training. So I think that'll be one conversation piece for us, is that training adequate? Should we be providing more training across the board? Is it just more training for certain individuals? Is there anything else, just from details or anything, anybody has questions on for how everything
So
currently
for
running?
Chief Howard, the way you track the time on calls, I mean, that adds up to about 7 full-time people, 14,000 hours, right? Am I reading that right? If
Those are 14,000 minutes. Those are minutes.
14,000
Yeah,
minutes.
about
Okay.
7.72 hours a week is what
7
we're,
point,
is
okay.
what we're devoting to animal control calls, roughly.
Does that include reporting time and everything?
Yep. Yeah, because on a CAD call, it'll tell you the time you get there and then the time you are available again. And that's the minutes I used. And if you're looking at January, February, these are low calls. It's once April got here, May got here. Now we're really, if I broke down it by months of probably April, May, June, July, it's probably a lot more than that. It's probably more than that 7 hours a week, because that's when windows are open. That's when people are out. That's when dogs are being walked. That's when conflicts happen between neighborly dogs, and so that's gonna be a lot higher than that. This is just based on the weeks that we've had so far this year, from the day when our contract ended with Waterloo.
Thanks.
Mark, do you have any idea, ballpark, what percent would be domestic animals and what percent wild?
I know, I'd have to go back through them all.
20%, 50%? Just, okay.
It would be under 20% or wild
Okay.
animals. Most of it's
What
domestic.
about Cedar Bend? What's your experience with the wild animals versus domestic?
Your domestics are gonna be a lot higher.
Sure.
We agree with that as far as your healthy wildlife, we can't just be going out and picking up every healthy wildlife or wild animal because somebody doesn't want it in their yard.
Mhm.
Always where we come in is the sick or injured, or the orphan babies. Some of the things that we hear, and again, please keep in mind, some of this is through the grapevine stuff. So, I don't have anything necessarily concrete to say one way or another, but some of the things that we hear, like from the public, because a lot of times they'll call us if they can't get results or whatever, is raccoons are a big one, that they say they're not gonna come out, or they said they're not coming out, or it's been 4 hours, or, that type of thing. Again, that's a lot of hearsay, there's always 2 sides to every story, but, or we've had some people, complain that, whether this is true or not, that, some of the officers have said, well, nature just has to take its course because it's a wild animal. So if it's an injured animal, they just move it off into like a parking area, or a woods or something like that, if it's injured, instead of, shooting it or whatever, which I get to some degree, because you don't want to shoot something in the middle of a busy street, but we are there. That is part of their contract too, to bring them out to us. We don't get very many wildlife. They don't bring us wildlife very often, if ever. But I have encouraged them that, especially if it's like a raccoon or something like that, I kind of get that mentality as far as, you can't be out there picking up all these raccoons and wild animals, but it does become a safety hazard also. How would you deal with a raccoon? If you had a sick raccoon sitting on your front porch, especially, let's say you're single older woman or something like that, what would you do with that? That becomes a safety issue, so.
Well, the raccoons are attracted by the cat food that people put out for the stray cats.
We also have, we found just from past years, especially when we used to do animal control years ago, they live in your sewer systems. And there's certain areas of Cedar Falls, that we used to track because, you'd have like distemper outbreaks every year, you know, with your raccoons. So, we used to handle quite a few sick or injured raccoons, you know, from Cedar Falls. Now, when Waterloo did it, I think they just disposed of them on their own, so we did not get them, but yeah,
That's usually the injured and roadkill and,
Correct.
or dying on the road.
correct, yeah,
Okay,
so,
but the animals that are in the window wells, I had the newest experience. After 42 years of working with rental property, I had a skunk in the
Oh.
basement of my property. And we
Yeah.
hoped that it would leave on its own
Yeah.
because you don't confront a skunk very easy.
Yeah.
And it didn't, so we trapped it and they put a bag around the, what's that, life trap?
Yep.
And then he sneaks behind it, he closes it, and when the skunk can't see, it doesn't spray.
correct,
Write that down, remember that.
yeah,
Comes in handy in the future someday. But then he carried it out like a suitcase.
Yep.
And off it went. So who does that here in town?
so I don't know that anybody does that unless you have, I mean, there are different people that do like your nuisance wildlife removal or whatever, and of course, then the homeowner's gonna have to pay for that. you
Right,
know,
that's
so-
a service I had to call.
Yep,
And
yep,
then,
so,
Blackhawk, we reached out to Blackhawk County Conservation and they've actually said they would start helping us on calls like that once in a while. So
They have people qualified to do that?
they
Or
do,
that
they do. And they're,
We got
they're,
some business cards too from
Yeah,
the
That would be very
wildlife
good to spread around.
that we give to people if they need it.
And then on a different scale than we're talking about the bats in a house, which I don't know if you get calls ever for that. Protected species, you can't kill them. There's people that do bat removal. As well, specialized Myers.
and like your skunks and your bats and your, I mean, some of those are concerning because, you know, those are species that still readily carry rabies, you know. We don't see it very often, but, so there's kind of that fine line there, you know, obviously, is it sick, is it injured, is it not, you know, is it just something that people want removed? But
Okay.
typically, even when we did animal control, we did not go do like nuisance removals, you know, so it was like you're sick, you're injured,
Yeah.
that type of thing. If you can handle it, then it probably should come to us or something, because usually you shouldn't be able to go up and pick up, you know, like a wild, you know, raccoon or whatever, so. but-
And bat removal is something that all police departments all over the United States do all the time. I mean. Depending on.
I think.
I've removed dozens
the
and
look
dozens
of
and
like-
dozens, and you
No,
always go.
was one very reputable person that I used, I think, 3 different times over 20 years. And they put little exit tubes on the property. They know where they go in and out. And a bat won't land on the end of a tube. They exit, but then they don't go back in.
yeah,
And then they
we'll,
come back a couple days later and close it.
we'll go in and
I
catch a
think he needs
bat.
a part-time job.
We'll
I
go-
told you I would
It
do
wasn't a
it
job
for
interview.
half the price of.
So we, you know, our night shift goes in and catches bats all the time and we just use a bath towel and we release
Do you
them.
Then we
really?
just release
But
them
if
right
the
in backyard.
belfry
I
is
thought you were
full-
joking.
Oh, no.
No,
I've-
we
I've
do
done
all the
dozens or
time.
hundreds of them.
But we don't eradicate them from your belfry. If
Yeah.
you've got thousands of bats,
No, you gotta
get
get
a
it.
call.
Terrifying.
Yeah, you gotta call.
But if you get sent there and you know it's a bat call, it's not terrifying because you know what you're gonna see and they tell you what.
We,
we're gonna see.
those are,
You just go deal with it.
those are actually weekly calls in the summer.
I didn't know that. I
Oh,
thought
yeah.
you were joking.
We have always done
Well,
those.
the babies come out and they start looking for, and they don't know where to go and they end up inside the house instead of going outside the house.
Yes.
Okay, so quick, just to kind of keep us on
So,
the constructive topics, unless you had something
I
constructive.
just had a question. So,
Yeah.
so Mark, so tell me with the wildlife, because you guys don't usually bring the sick or injured to us. Like what, can I ask, like, how do you guys handle your sick or injured wildlife?
Give me an example, like a raccoon that's sick.
So yeah, or like if you have something that's hit, a wild animal that's like hit by a car, but it's not dead, or if it's like laying on the sidewalk or what have you.
They'll get on the radio with the supervisor, say, I have a clear path and we shoot
Yep.
it.
Or they take it somewhere and shoot
And
it.
then Public
Okay.
Works comes and takes them.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's in the, really like the inner city, a lot of people around or a lot of concrete, try and take it somewhere where you can shoot it safely.
We're just really careful about what we put in our cars. You know, we don't put sick animals in our cars. So we have our truck, our one truck.
You bag them or what?
Uh,
Any sack or
If
something?
it's a weekend, we will and bag them, and then Public Works has a place for us down at Bluff Street where we put them. Otherwise, we call them and they come get them for us.
Okay.
They've been a huge help for us.
Because right now it's Public Works that's in charge of animal pickup and all that.
And I think it has to go to, and I'm not trying to go back and forth here, but there was a call where we had a lady that called in several times one night wanting this raccoon out of her backyard. It did take over 4 hours, but it also should be noted, Shift was working a very violent domestic call that night. And she was taught, the supervisor called him himself, I think at least 3 times saying, I'm sorry, we'll get there when we can. And we just have to choose priority and you know, animals are always going to take a backseat to human life. And that's, as far as police officers go. I remember that call well. I was in the building, so, and that's just how we had to handle it that night. We hated it. We wanted to get somebody over there, but there was no way we could do that.
So do you think they ever do, I mean, and again, I don't have necessarily concrete proof, just hearsay, you know, I mean, we've even had your officers tell my staff before, you know, nature has to take its course, you know. Like, do you think they ever do that, where they'll take a wild animal and just like, okay, it's injured and put it off in the woods and just let nature take its course? I mean,
I have never heard that. Usually the officers will shoot it.
Yeah.
They're instructed to shoot it. They're trained to shoot it. We teach them where to shoot them.
I had one time myself was on a call and it was an injured, red-tailed hawk, and that's what Blackhawk County Conservation said to do. Just leave it on the side of the road with a broken wing. Don't do anything. Don't shoot it, just leave it. And they said something else will eat it that night, so.
A bird like that, we would probably call it.
Or that was the rehab people actually that said that,
Yeah.
that there's nothing they can do for a hawk with a broken wing.
I know we had a owl with a broken wing once in Blackhawk County come and help us get it, conservation, and they ended up taking that. I don't know whether they took it to y'all or not, but.
no,
it's
they
years
probably
ago.
took it to them, but just know that's part of your contract, you know, if you do have a wild animal, like, obviously, you know, you pay for that service to bring it in for us to euthanize, but I've just heard concerns, you know, again, and I don't have anything substantial to tell you, you know. So I always take that with a grain of salt, you know, how hearsay is, but like you do have that in your contract that if you don't want to shoot it or you can't shoot it, or you're that position that somebody doesn't want to, that you do have that in your contract that you can bring it to us and we will euthanize that and dispose of
It just
that.
depends on the animal and if we have a vehicle that we can
Right.
transport it in,
Right.
so.
Correction, we don't do deer. So, or skunks.
Well, these services all have a fee, and you're
Correct.
charging City of Cedar Falls, City of Waterloo to do disposals, and how much?
You just pay per animal, just like, I mean, we have a contract with them that Cedar Falls pays us per animal that comes in.
Yeah.
So it'd be the same thing. It's just we would euthanize it instead of hold it for 3 days, so.
Yeah,
And then
that's
we would euthanize it and dispose of that, so.
So your method of euthanizing is shoot,
No, we have,
inject?
no, it's, we do humane euthanasia through
Okay.
injection, yeah, just like we would, like if you put
Okay.
your dog or cat to sleep.
Sure.
Cause I know a few of the things that I've heard, the main structural questions were concerns about just the training level, which I think really went to the consistency piece of, like I said, some officers are animal people. You know, they're gonna go above and beyond to try and figure out the situation, and if they have the time. I think that's kind of ties with the second concern was just, this is put on our public safety. I don't believe we've hired any additional public safety. We haven't expanded staff based on this new addition responsibility. So I think there were some concerns that our staff weren't sitting around with nothing to do before animal control was dropped on their lap. So 8 hours a week might not seem like much, but when you were already working a full shift load, it is a lot. So I think that's some of the main concerns that I had from just conversations with a lot of community members, with you guys, with Cedar Bend, was the training, and is that sufficient to really make sure our officers are put in a situation where they can make a good decision and have the knowledge to make a good decision? But also then, do they have the time and the wherewithal within their other duties to really do this effectively? And that's a big conversation I'd like to make sure we have, is because I think those are some of the biggest critical points in this. Is I think everyone, like you said, I haven't heard anyone yelling or complaining that they have to do this, but it is just, it's another thing on top of a very big list of existing duties. And some, like you said, are, I think, very excited to do it. Some that it's another responsibility on top of everything else. So just, do you guys have any thoughts on where we're at with that and how the workload's been?
I would say, you know, all of our officers have personalities, and you probably do have, the bulk of the animal control, you know, Mark's kind of said, you know, between 10 PM or 10 AM and 8 PM. So you're kind of getting down to 2 shifts. It's probably mostly officers on that shift, not as much the captain or the lieutenants. So yeah, we could have some staff that is, getting some, you know, they're going to a few animal controls, they're getting better at it because maybe they're going to calls 2, 3, 4, you know, But then you have other people who maybe haven't had animal control call in 2-3 months. And I would say for whether it's a animal control call, you know, our officers, they all have a personality. Some people like doing car accidents, some people don't. Some people can stand in the living room and tell somebody, you know, a loved one died and it doesn't affect them. Some people don't like doing notifications. Some people probably enjoy animal calls more than others. So, some people like to walk bars, some people wish they never have to walk a bar again. So, but it has been a groundswell of people upset over it or anything like that. But it's another task, so.
Well, Director Bird, do you think you want to entertain the idea of continuing with some fine tuning with Cedar Bend, or what do you want to do? Between the two of you, have you got a preference? How do we proceed with this?
Well, I think that's really what the task force is for. I mean,
I mean, we're all kind of listening. I'm talking a lot, but, just because I talk about skunks and things, but, that's my concern. The domestic animal seems easy, really. And my experiences over the years, I've dealt with all kinds of domestic animals through the rental scenario. But the wildlife and injured wildlife that you're referring to, you know, growing up on a farm, we'd handle them a little bit differently than we would in the city. But the time-consuming experiences that I had over the years was dealing with the wild animals that wake up at night, and then the tenants are irritated, as they would. You know, that's a scenario that you wouldn't have the expertise to deal with. And that, to me, and that's what Mark, I was curious, what amount of these are wild animals? Like, I had one where the raccoon had the babies in the wall by the kitchen, and little baby raccoons sound like little babies crying. And the female tenants were very concerned and kind of spooked, is what they were. And it's what happens. And so it took us a while, and we had to let the babies grow up to be able to get out onto the roof and then trap them. And then we moved them with a wildlife relocate service.
I think the other thing is, you know, with regards to the domestic animals, obviously, those are probably, in some cases, pretty emotional folks calling, you know, and so if you don't have a lot of training, like you said, maybe haven't done it for a while, and you add those heightened emotions, I think that, you know, is part of why people react so strongly to those situations. And, you know, it's kind of my interpretation of all of those things that Mayor Loddick mentioned, that, you know, I'm not sure that this is the best course, especially when I look at how much training our officers receive for everything else. I mean, they are really experts with, you know, how to handle all of these other situations. And, you know, I'm not sure I feel comfortable making them experts in animal control as well, just because, you know, we don't have any added staff. It's taking away time from them being experts in those other areas. And I think that's where we really want them to be incredible at their job. So, you know, I think there is, if we are looking to continue having public safety be our animal control, I think we've really got to focus on some of those things.
And I think in fairness to your question about their opinion, I think part of this is on us as a group, because part of it's a political question of budget. Only because
Yeah.
right now, I think you guys can't hire someone additional to take on additional responsibilities unless we as the elected body were willing to say, we're gonna have to budget to create a new position, to bring on more officers, expand that. So I think we have to have that conversation based on all this to really look at, okay, whether we and I don't know if you guys have the budget numbers from what kind of the last 6 months, 8 months have been from our standpoint for overall costs of animal control. I know we kind of had.
We bought a ton of equipment, you know, we didn't know about these cat catchers. As soon as we learned about them, we went and got some. I mean, we're trying to do everything we can to make not just the animals safe, but I don't want officers, you know.
Right.
So, you know, we've got gloves, everything that we've bought. Christie's been wonderful. We go through her recommendation. We actually we just do. Tell me the brand. I want the exact, and that's really for my officers. I don't want them getting bit. I don't want them, you know, and I can't make a recommendation on what I should do. I think what my job here today is to tell you is that you're going to look at increasing calls to the police division by over 1,000 calls this year. You know, one way or the other, that's the truth of it. if you increase training, you're decreasing policing training. If you're not increasing training, are we gonna have more July incidents that we haven't talked about? I just think we have to weigh that. That needs to go on a scale, and we have to decide as a task force or the political body does, where they want that to go. I fear that, when you look at the amount of actual fire-related calls we've had this year so far, not even close to the animal calls we've already gone on this year, and the year's halfway over. So it's gonna take a lot of expertise and it's different. 15 years ago, when I was a patrol officer and we were doing animal control, we didn't, I don't wanna say we didn't love our animals, but they certainly weren't members of our family like they are now. And I give everybody this example. If somebody took off on foot at night from us, we used to stop and wait for two things: automatic lights to come on and dogs barking in the backyard. You do not hear dogs barking in the backyard because we, myself included, who has two huskies that never quit shedding, are inside. They're not outside. So we love our animals differently than we did. And it is definitely been a factor on our responses on how, in the time some of our officers will put in. When I see an officer spend 187 minutes on one animal control call, that's a lot. That's almost half a shift is spent on an animal control call. There might only be 3 other officers working when that happens. I'm being kind of swayed here, but I just, those are the measurements we have to look at, and then the political body here has to decide where to go forward.
So what would it take to staff our own, just animal control department?
It just depends what you wanna do, if you want, I mean, there's so many variables, like, do you wanna do night calls? Do you wanna do you want to have somebody patrol in the cities? Do you want them just answering calls? It just kind of depends. For us, like, let's say when we used to do animal control, we could probably, for our shelter, we could probably cover Cedar Falls if we didn't have to do night call, because you guys don't have tons and tons on night call. So to pay somebody just to sit and be on call for you to go on 5 calls a month, that's a lot of money. Our shelter, just because we have the availability, like, that's what we do as animals, like, they would be animal control officers, and then when they're not on calls, they'd be doing other animal tasks or whatever at the shelter. 2 to 3 people, I could probably do Cedar Falls, excluding night calls. If we didn't have to have somebody just sitting, because you still have to pay that person to just sit around and go on those calls, but, one thing that I just kind of wanted to say, kind of, if you guys don't mind, just kind of based on some of the things that you guys have said. First of all, I want to say I've been very impressed with 100%. You guys have done everything in your power to try to do everything right. Any questions you have, you come to us, you take all of our recommendations. Your officers, I'll say you do have some officers that I think go above and beyond, and they could not do a better job. I think you do have some officers, not that they're bad officers, but I mean, and they've even told us, we do not even want to be doing this. So I 100% agree with that. You have some officers that, and I don't even know that it's that they don't want to be doing it, but they don't feel comfortable doing it. We've had some people that have brought in cats that weren't handled necessarily appropriately, but in his defense, you could chuckle about it, but he's like, I'm scared to death of cats, and then you take that and they've only had an hour's worth of training to handle cats. You're not really putting that person in a real good situation to deal with that, in their, in their defense. So, I think with what you guys have had to deal with and what you guys have, as far as training and stuff, I think you guys do a good job. What we see from our side, from an animal welfare standard, and from the shelter, is pretty much, I'll piggyback on kind of what you guys have said. I think animal control, a lot of people think it's just, oh, we're gonna go pick up Aunt Mabel's little poodle that got loose. That's not usually the case. It is an expertise field. It is something that you need training on. Animal handling is just a quarter of that. A lot of the calls I get from your officers is even legalities. Legalities, can you take the animal? Can you not take the animal? Knowing your ordinances on animals, knowing your state ordinances on animals. If you seize an animal, then what procedures do you go through? there's more to just, you can't just go take somebody's animal and take it to the shelter. You know, there's so much that goes into that animal welfare, you know, the authority side of that also. And, you know, if you don't know, or you're not trained in those areas, then I don't want to say, oh, you guys are gonna get in a lawsuit, but like, you may not win your case, you know, they may have a lawsuit. You know, animals are very much loved and they're a part of our family, just like Mark, you said, 100%. So I think there is an emotional aspect, but there's also a legality aspect, and they are property, and it does have to be handled accordingly. So my fear, is I think you guys all try. I think you guys do the best you can. I, you know, appreciate you guys try to reach out when you have questions. Is just, it's just, it is what it is. Like what you said, Mark, you cannot train somebody for this amount of time and expect them to perform this amount of duties. Like they'll always get into a situation someday where, you know, something happens like with a ferret or whatever, because it's just, again, maybe it's not malicious, maybe it's not negligence, maybe it's just lack of training. Unfortunately, we're dealing with living, breathing things, and no matter how you think of animals, there's still that aspect of Cedar Falls does portray itself as being very heavy into animal welfare. I think you guys, you know, really put a lot of importance on our pets. And so that kind of becomes a problem sometimes, so.
I think it would do, especially the elected body, it would do you well. I met with Chief Duncan in Waterloo and what they're getting ready to do or have started to do. I think it would not hurt to visit with them to even maybe, you know, go over and see what they've begun to do with some part-timers. They collapsed their animal control and now are running it through their police department, through part-timers, but they've got a pretty good start. It's a start, but a system set up of what type of calls they'll handle compared to patrol, but it's a hybrid. So I think there's some options. There's, you know, what Christie could do for us at Cedar Bend, or do we look at, you know, do you look at what Waterloo's trying to do in-house? But I would suggest some research.
So Mark, along that lines, cities like Ames, Cedar Rapids, a lot of Des Moines suburbs where the communities are growing into the timbers and woods, and what do? Have you
They
ever
have
reached out?
contracts with like Cedar Bend, like Marion has a contract with Cedar Bend. Cedar Rapids has their own. So when we first started this last
Yeah.
December, it's Captain Herenstein and I did just research after research, and it's just different everywhere.
Contract with
But I
all
will
different
tell you,
groups.
there are resources in these larger metro areas that Blackhawk County, Cedar Valley, we don't have. You know, we have a great resource. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
But that service isn't part of it. So where there's even private companies that,
Yeah, we call around different cities and they probably do it, they have contracts with probably 8-10 different organizations. If you go around the Des Moines
What-
Metro.
and it's
What kind
not,
of organizations, like?
It's
like
not- well, it's-
Cedar Bend type of organizations?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
matter of fact, part of the Humane Society organizations. And it's not like private citizens who can come and say, I can provide that for you. You know, if you've sat through what it takes to be to contract with Cedar Falls,
Yeah.
you have to be an established and you have to meet certain criteria to even meet our insurance, to sign a contract with the city of Cedar Falls. So we can't just go out and solicit individuals.
Somewhere, I think somewhere even like through PETA or PETA related,
Yeah.
different welfare. Just, there was different names all the way around the metro area.
well, like for us, we have probably 4 different licensing just to have what we have, like a kennel license and agricultural and,
Sure.
you know, I mean, all, you know, DEA, you know, all of that. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, I'm not saying you guys can't do it in-house. I'm not here to say that, you know, I mean, we're more than willing to have discussions if that's something, you know, you want from us. I can't do it probably for what you can do it in-house, just because, you know, we have to have our staff and our vehicles and all of that, but that's just my biggest concern, or even the questions that your officers have to answer. So like, for an example, if I look at the number of cats, for an example, that you guys, from like March through June, like historically what we bring in compared to this last year. Like you guys usually bring in anywhere between 50 to 75 cats. I think you brought in 17. Now I'm not saying that's bad, but like, I know there's just a lot of times they get calls on cats. You guys have been great with the TNR program, but then sometimes like your officers don't even know how to identify between what kind of cat needs to come in and what doesn't. You know, they were just told, okay, this is the TNR cat, they're gonna go back out there, so they've told people, well, they're just gonna bring the cat back out there, when in reality, it was a cat that probably needed to be brought in and kept, so. And they're not doing anything wrong, it's just, like I said, I think it's just, there's so many different aspects to that.
There's a lot to that though, because Waterloo Animal Control was not logging. So if you go back to CAD and you look up all the calls for service for these cats, they don't exist. I'm not saying they weren't bringing you cats.
Right,
We only respond, if I see a cat walking on the sidewalk, I am not pulling my squad car over and going.
Right,
to somebody's cat.
right.
We only respond to people that call in and report it. I can tell you by going, matter of fact, I had started an audit on what Waterloo Animal Control was charging us, just before I found out the contract was gonna end, because I didn't know where their numbers were coming from.
Right.
I'm seeing 4 or 5 calls in a month for a stray cat, yet I was getting a bill for 47 cats going, wow.
See.
So there is some skewed there. I'm not saying anybody was
Right.
being dishonest.
And all I have is the number of the animals that came into it, so, and those are just some concerns of mine, like I said,
Right.
you know, we'll work with you and we want to work with you just because, you know, Cedar Falls is important to us and the animal welfare. But those are just concerns that we see on our end as far as that we just don't want to see a situation, you know, kind of like what happened with the ferret or whatever, you know, or how do we help prevent something like that, so.
And Christy has donated a lot, volunteered a lot of consulting hours to the city of Cedar Falls with this also. And she does have other responsibilities. And I don't know if you could give us an estimate, how many hours a week, how many hours you put into this so far, let alone the training of the officers. But I know there have been times she's had things to do for the board and she said, it's not ready yet. Something came up with the city of Cedar Falls. I mean, and that is a true statement.
I wouldn't argue that at all. She's been wonderful.
Which we're happy, I mean, we are happy to help, you know, but.
You have other things to do?
Yeah.
No. Just don't let them know.
So, Mark, you may have said this earlier, but of the domestic animals, is a greater portion injured that you deal with or healthy?
Healthy.
Most of them are healthy.
Mhm.
So 60%, 40?
I don't.
I'm
We don't-
analytical.
my
I'm
CAD system-
sorry, Mark, I'm
You
too
have to
analytical for
understand,
you.
Well, we don't have that kind of system. Now, maybe when Central Square's up and running, but our system's 30 years old. So when I go through and get these numbers, that's me looking at a piece of paper, one at a time, 500 and some calls,
Okay.
trying to extract everything I can. Now I can
We
go
have a-
back.
I might be able to run that report.
And we have a September meeting coming up, and we can break down those 500
Yeah.
calls between now and then.
Okay,
I might,
because I
Print out
think,
500 sheets of paper and read through them and make stacks.
I
and-
don't know if that's a great
I
use of
don't,
time.
yeah, I don't know. if-
Well,
Yeah, that's.
Well, we wouldn't do it. We got people that can do it.
No, I'm saying-
But I don't know what that information is gonna tell us.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I think you deal with an injured animal differently than a healthy animal, and there's more cost to
But
me.
it's the call in general.
But if we've
There's certain
got,
findings.
if
Yeah,
we've
you're
got,
still responding,
yeah,
so
if we've got an
breaking it
injured,
down.
if we've got an injured domesticated animal, we either gonna get it to Cedar Bend, or we now have a list of vets that'll come to the scene. If we
Okay.
feel it's something that shouldn't be transported.
Okay.
To where they'll even euthanize it on scene.
Well, that's
It'll
good.
be a vet
That's
that'll do it.
kind of getting
I
that.
mean, we've gotten as creative as we can because we like animals too.
Mhm.
You know, it's gonna, we're police officers and that will always be our number one priority. And when we're asked to do this, I thought we took it head on. I really do. I think now do I have officers that hate it? Yep, absolutely. But we try to do it as best we can. Are we gonna be what Christie's people could be? No, I'm just being honest with you. You will never be
Well,
able to.
well, and I kind of disagree, and I'm not arguing with you because the sick and injured 100%, but I also kind of keep in mind that I think that we're not thinking of that they deal with a lot that is even more so is your aggressive animals. That's a huge thing. Like if they go out and I've had calls from their officers like, hey, we're out here on scene, like, you know, they have a dog charging people, you know, things like that. So that's a huge issue. And then their neglect issues, I think, take up a ton of their time because they have to sit and try to decide, do I take the animal? Do I not take the animal? You know, what body score is it? Or is it something that it's healthy, but it's just left out in the rain for 5 hours? So, in my opinion, the sick and injured are handled different. And I do think, I agree with you, they need to have that expertise. But as far as their time, I see the things that I help them deal with are the neglect cases, the aggressive animals. To be quite honest with you, the things that they have to deal with, the people component, that they're not real sure which way they're supposed to go with that. That seems to take a huge amount of their time
Mhm.
on those types of calls, or where I see where they're very unsure of some of that. If that kind of makes
Okay.
sense.
Well, that's answering my question of how to allocate resources, whether we use you or we do it in-house, and whether it's wildlife, injured wildlife, healthy wildlife.
And I think something for us to keep in mind is, like you just mentioned, you had to sit down and pull this all together. Much as we might not see that in the budget line item, because it's just public safety salary. That's cost and expenditure, time spent elsewhere that's going to managing all this that isn't necessarily reflected in the budget we have put in place for it.
And I think that maybe if our new software doesn't do some kind of tracking and we're gonna keep this, then we should probably look at having a software that does that.
Are we in line to upgrade some of these systems that are 30 years old?
Yeah, well, we're in about a 3-year process to replace that system, so, or a 5-year process, so. We should have new software real soon.
Are we in year 1 or year 4?
Well.
We're in year 5 and I go to a
supposed be
meeting.
6 months.
I go to a meeting on it every first Wednesday of every month, and we're supposed to go live sometime in the first quarter next year.
Cool.
But it's been in the process for 5 years now.
Okay.
If we were in the animal control business long-term, we would probably, our animal control would go to a sport services captain or something. But since this came at us kind of fast, we made the presentation to council. Mark has been that link to Christie. And so, we kind of joke in house that I supervise a fire chief and an animal control chief because
Yeah.
it's Mark spends a lot of time on animal control, misses a lot of other meetings because he's at animal control. He's working with you on things. So it does take a lot of time. If we stay in the animal control business and we do it longer, eventually we would have a captain would take it over and not have the chief of police doing it. But the communication piece is where we struggle, getting the right information to our supervisors. And we're just at a point where it doesn't help to pull more people into it. Just keep the chief working with it directly down to the shifts.
So I think our learning curve is plateauing or like,
Well, we have new people starting every month that haven't even been through the training. I guess we'd have 15 people that since February that haven't been through their training because they're new, with 6 or 7 training at the academy right now. I mean, it's gotta be continuous if we're gonna continue to have.
I mean,
So now you said it wouldn't be feasible, and just a question, because I don't know how you guys work. If you had, in my mind, and I know we had even talked about this, that it's like, if you had 2 or 3 people for each shift trained specifically for animal control, went through animal control training, got certified, so that wouldn't really work for you guys?
We've actually, in a lot of different areas, we've tried to do that. Somebody's a specialist in domestic abuse, somebody's a specialist in sexual abuse. Well, everybody's on rotating days off and you can't control what calls they're on. So if the animal specialist is tied up with a domestic abuse or a mental health call for 4 hours, it didn't help because now you gotta send an officer act, so
And then come October, shift bids. January 1, all our shift.
they
change.
switch.
It's all based on seniority, so you might have all your animal control people now working 3rd shift.
I see, because that was kind of my thought. I mean, just not knowing your
Yeah.
infrastructure is that it's like, in all reality, if you had, put those resources into so many people for each shift, in my mind thinking, kind of like how we're, like if we had 3 people, then that's somebody to cover whenever anybody's off, then that would be very beneficial for you because then you still, those people would be trained in that area and theoretically they would deal with, those issues, but that makes sense.
Yep. We could try to have some people who have more training and try to get them to the most of the animal calls, but you could just never make it to where there's just no guarantee because between days off and training events and rotating schedules and the officers are going on calls all day long.
Yep.
So we don't deploy from the station. They're out patrolling, they're at calls, and then they get sent to an animal control. So you don't
That makes
know,
sense. Yeah.
you don't know what call your animal control
Right.
specialist might be on.
And I would imagine it would not be popular. SWAT, animal control.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think it would always be our newest people that we're forcing into it.
Yeah.
And it would be a constant rotation.
I think that's what's, I guess I don't know what the right word would be, that is sad or frustrating is that, and we all do things that we don't want to do in our job, right? But, where we have somebody trying to handle an animal that is either fearful or that's not a comfortable position for them. And then, of course, they don't have the, years of training under their belt either to do it correctly. So that's frustrating for us because then, you know, I mean, we do try to help them. A lot of times they'll come in and get us and they'll be like, can you help get that animal out of our car? You know, and we do try to help whenever we can,
And they
you
don't
know,
get the frequency, they just won't
yeah,
get the frequency.
right, so.
Doing it multiple times.
So that's kind of, you know, I just know in my industry for doing it for 25 years, like, well, just to be blunt, you'll never get good at doing that with the frequency that their officers are.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
Well,
what,
and
you don't do this work at all, then?
No.
For any other
We
community?
used to do animal control for Cedar Falls, Waterloo. And this has probably been what, 15 years ago. Waterloo, our contract, we needed an increase just because we hadn't had an increase for years. And so Waterloo's like, I think we can do it cheaper. So they took it over and then we didn't even house their animals. They had a bus barn somewhere, that they housed them and they were gonna bring in volunteers to take care of them and all that and save a ton of money. We still did your animal control for about a year. Well, then Waterloo came to Cedar Falls and said, hey, we can do it for you cheaper than what Cedar Bend is. Because I think they wanted your income too. And so Cedar Falls said, yep, okay, so then they went. So then we didn't do it for either city for about a year and a half. It failed miserably on Waterloo's side. Pretty much every city council person came to my office. They're like, would you take this back? But at that point in time, you know, I mean, because we're a nonprofit too, like I can't afford to keep my insurance and my officers and my vehicles and my equipment just for not doing that business. So I said, you know, your startup fees are gonna be a lot more higher now because we haven't done this for a year and a half. So then we worked with Waterloo and we kind of came up with a hybrid of sorts that they already had animal control people in place. That we will just go ahead and take your animals and house them for you. You still do the enforcement on the street and, we'll go ahead and we'll take your animals and house them. Cause they were having a lot of issue. You can't get volunteers to handle stray animals on a consistent basis and do it well. You just can't. And safely. So that's kind of what we did. And then as soon as Waterloo did that, Cedar Falls was like, well, they followed suit. They said, well, Waterloo was still doing your animal control. And so they said, then Cedar Falls came and said, well, if Waterloo, you're holding Waterloo's animals, will you hold our animals too? So you guys have kind of just really piggybacked. I don't want to say you haven't made your own decisions, but pretty much everything Waterloo did, you guys just did because you kind of counted on Waterloo to do some of that for you.
So are you in a position that you could come to us and say, hey, here's a proposal, here's what it would cost and take for us? And knowing that we have equipment and a vehicle and cat catcher and these other things, or what's your position on?
They can't have our vehicle.
That's our
SWAT
SWAT
vehicle.
van.
Oh, okay.
That's what I really wanted.
That's what they should drive around.
Yes.
Easy deal.
So I gave some very, very rough numbers to the mayor because keep in mind, like, not to sound rude, but for me to spend that amount of time to come up with something that, you know, you guys don't want to put that kind of money into, you know, I just didn't want to do that unless it was like, you guys are like, this is what we seriously want. So I put in just a real rough outline of about, this is kind of what it's going to cost you guys roughly for us to do that. Again, that's very tentative. Just by my knowledge on what it would take for us for some of those costs without me even looking into it farther. So it could range a little bit, you know, less or more, and it depends on, and I think in that outline, I even kind of left some things open, like questions about night call, you know, things that cost us a lot, gas, you know, are there things that we could work with the city? Could we buy our gas from you at a cheaper cost? You know, things like that. So are there things, if you ever decided that you wanted us to do that service, instead of an all or nothing, is it something that we could work on? There's some things that we could get from your side to help save you money, make things a little easier for us and vice versa. I don't want to sit here and tell you yes or no. Put it this way, like, it can't cost us money. Like, that's what our problem was before. We had done animal control for many years and it had been stagnant. I think the director before me, it had sat for 10 years without any type of an increase, any type of whatever. And, you know, it was costing us to do animal control. Or like we would need a new vehicle. Our vehicle had been like 10 years old, being driven out on the road day in and day out, animal control. And the city's like, well, that's on you. Well, so our donors would have to pay for that. So that's kind of where we got into those conversations with Waterloo and kind of got out of that because we couldn't afford to continue to do that. So
Yep.
I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes. I think that would be something that we would be interested in chatting about. I think it would not be hard for our organization to perform animal control duties for Cedar Falls. Especially if all we did was Cedar Falls. Well, we do Blackhawk County. We do Blackhawk County already, but that's, we probably do less than 100 calls a year, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's a possibility there.
Yeah, and from my end, so I do have those numbers for today, since we've got about 25 minutes left. Figured just get a read of where everyone was at. And I think, you mentioned Waterloo's model. And what I was thinking is for the next session, if we come with some of those options, we can maybe look more at Waterloo's. Cause I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Waterloo's model is they actually have staffed animal control who are housed under a police supervisor.
Yep, part-time.
Part-time.
And then they rotate who's on call on weekends, but they only go out on major calls, but they're building what they consider major calls. So it's real infancy. They don't, like right now, a bike calls a major call.
Or hit by car,
Or
like
hit by car,
alive, yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's, Permar that answers all their phones after
Yeah.
hours, so they don't even have
Yep.
dispatch or anything like that. They hire, an outside company to answer all their calls.
And you'll find, when I did my research last fall, once we started losing we knew we were gonna lose our contract, every metro area has a system. And I feel that, it's probably worth homework, especially, even site visit to some of these cities to see what they're, because this is a problem everywhere. It's not like Cedar Falls are the only people that love their animals. I mean, I think,
Yeah, and I will tell you, we're part of the Iowa Federation of Humane Societies. And so that's something that just being part of that organization, it's just basically your group with all of your humane societies, animal rescues, all of that within Iowa. Almost every city has gone through similar things. I mean, a lot of your smaller cities, I get calls a lot. Like, it's like, okay, how does your animal control model work? That type of thing. So, I think animal control it's kind of a different animal all in itself, excuse the pun, but so I agree with you, Mark. It has to be what works for you guys. So I will say, if it's something that we ever decided, or you decided that you wanted us to do, and we would come in with an agreement, I know the number that I kind of tentatively put together for the mayor, everybody's probably gonna think, oh my gosh, that's super high, but keep in mind that would include all of your animals. Like right now, we charge you per animal. Every animal that comes in, I bill you for that. Every bite case that comes in, I bill you for that. So it used to be years ago when we had a contract with you, it was like, this is our annual fee. This is the services we provide, and it includes the animals and such. We still keep track of that, but it's not like, we bill you for every incident then, so.
When you say it includes the animals, what are you referring to?
So like you pay us anywhere, I think the last couple of years, it was like 50-some thousand a year for animals. So for they pick up a stray dog, they bring it to us, we hold it for 3 days, we charge you a fee for
it's
that.
like $94.
Yeah.
It's a straight
That's what?
fee. It's 94 something.
Actually, that's gone down because we only hold your animals for 3 days.
Yeah,
now.
that was when we had 5 days,
So
but I know that's what it
You're
was.
boarding the animal, basically.
Correct. So we
Okay.
have to give vaccinations and all of that. So your boarding fee pretty much covers the care of that animal.
So then someone charge the owner of the dog that might habitually come in as a deterrent to make sure
Yeah.
it's in?
We never used to, but now we have that.
Yeah.
Fee redemption.
And those are some things we talked about that I told them. I said, to help recoup some of your fees or to reduce costs, I would reduce your days from 5 days to 3 days, because we charge so much per day is what it is. Some other things is they charge a pickup fee, or we call it a pickup fee. They call it a redemption fee, but a pickup fee. So if you as an owner come in and redeem your animal, then you pay, that fee that you would usually pay for us.
The cost of,
Yep, and we collect that, and then the microchip also, they regulate that, so that's kind of nice, because you can see who your repeat offenders are, or if they pick up an animal, they have a chip scanner, and they can take it home, and they can deal with the owner directly, and they don't even have to bring it to us. So we're all about helping, our goal is less intake, we're here to take in animals, but if it doesn't come to us, we're not unhappy about that,
are we recouping 20% of our costs through the
We just started in
Yeah.
July.
We
Okay.
recoup almost nothing. So yeah, it used to be if, somebody pick up a dog, it goes out there, they come and get their dog, we're still, the taxpayers of Cedar Falls are paying all
We've had,
those costs.
we've had 4 since July.
Yeah.
At the police department.
What do you call
So like, just for an example, in 2024, -3. So you had 97 dogs that came to us through animal control. One of those was a DOA, so we won't count that. And one of that was an owner surrender, so you're not gonna count that. So out of those 97 dogs, 50 of them were redeemed by owners. So
that
that,
we could recoup that?
so that you could recoup that from. I mean, obviously
That's what
not,
You said 97? Was it grand total?
yes, it'd be 95. because-
95, so a little over half we
Mhm.
can recoup.
Yep.
That could go into the formula of.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that,
we recoup the redemption fee, but we're still paying for whatever they charge to
Correct.
hold the dog.
but the owner would,
So the owner, so what we do is they come in, they still pay us a bill because otherwise it's a tracking nightmare.
Mhm.
So what we do is we track all the animals and we charge them that. We also look at all the redemptions or pickup fees that we collected, and then at the end of the month, we give them a check. Because we collect all that for them. We do take a 2% handling fee just because my staff has to collect that money from the people and all of that, but, so then every month, at the same time that we give you your invoice, we also send our check along with, so.
so then is the city of Cedar Falls recouping 98% of the animals that owners come to pick up? Is that what you're saying?
They will be,
They will be as of
as
now.
of July 1, yeah.
Well, but we're still paying the main siding
Yeah.
costs, so the taxpayers are,
They've got.
Why don't we recoup that through the owner?
but we don't. But that's-
Why don't we? Should we consider doing that?
Kevin to write an ordinance.
Yeah, but you probably have some owners that walk away from the animal then too.
Oh, yeah, we
You'd
have a
have
lot of
people say,
animals,
I'm not paying,
we have a lot of animals that aren't, recouped, so, but.
Well, 50%, I mean,
But if you raise the price.
but all of a sudden, if you're telling them they owe
Actually,
$200-300, all of a
Yeah,
sudden-
I will tell you, we had actually talked about, at one point, we had talked about $100. And just from, because Waterloo does this also, and I will just tell you that if you raise that up much more than that, they're not gonna take it.
well,
Yeah, it was Christie's recommendation to do 25 like Waterloo does, and we had settled at 50 through our schedule fee. Because I brought it to the table to say, hey, they've got stats that show if you go to 100, people will walk away from it.
I think you'll have a lot of animals not, and your cats, unfortunately, your cats, your dogs are gonna get recouped, but like your cats, we took in 395 cats, all right, so 10 of those, 3 of those were DOA, so 395 minus 13, and then redemption wise for those, 18 cats were redeemed, so.
well.
And this is just quick, because for the sake of time, that's a whole separate conversation I think we get into about ordinances and costs. For
well, that's
today,
Part of recouping our expenditure.
yeah, but that would be a whole different conversation, like,
Put
we're
it
just
together.
trying to talk structurally right now on
We
who's
don't know
doing.
the whole cost yet, because it isn't $100.
No,
Yeah.
but the only comment I'll do real quick, on a rental agreement with a tenant, it's very common for landlords to charge 25 to 40 bucks for a cat monthly,
Right.
and a dog 50 for a small dog and $100 a month, and people pay it all day long.
But that, Daryl, I got the same rental agreement with tenants I have too.
Yeah.
So you're talking about people that,
Let
are
their
in a
animals
different
run.
situation.
Yeah.
It isn't a rental.
Yeah.
And it isn't always, but
The
you're trying to,
homeowner, okay.
yeah, it's a
Well,
different
I'm
situation.
just putting a spectrum of what
Yep.
people will spend on an animal.
Yeah,
They go to the vet and spend thousands on surgery.
Unfortunately, I'm not saying everybody, there's a lot of pets that just accidentally get loose and the people are frantic and come get them and they're great pet owners. But I will tell you that the animals that we get in, and that's why we did the microchip, because it's the same, we deal with the same people over and over again.
Like,
And so unfortunately, they won't come get their animal and then next week they have a different one.
They
So,
don't fix the fence in the yard and, okay.
correct.
So,
Or the dog.
yeah,
So, if we were moving animal control to anyone else. Would Public Works continue to do our dead animal pickup?
And so, yes, because I think to clarify, what you propose has nothing to do with dead animal pickup. That would still be something we would have to look at doing through probably Public Works.
Some of the things that I put just tentatively on that list were just concerns of mine that we're just not in a position to do. And it would cost us or you guys a lot more for us to get into that position, you know. Deer pickup, dead animal pickup, that would save you money if we didn't have to do that. Like I said, night call was kind of a concern of ours. So I did have just a few things that I just jotted down that'd be just kind of like, they would be up for discussion.
What if you had a SWAT vehicle?
I'm in it. So personal.
On call whenever you need it.
35 years.
Yeah.
Now, if you could give us numbers of what you're just describing, it'd be helpful to know what we want to do in-house and what we want to.
I gave the mayor just some tentative
Okay.
numbers. And
So
if you
that's why
guys,
today we won't be able to get into those
Yes.
details. Just really quick, Brian or Chase, did you want to just comment on the animal pickup?
So Chase Sharkey, Director of Public Works, Brian Heath is the Operations and Maintenance Manager. So since we started in early January, there's been 76 dead animal collections. Obviously, if it's a domestic animal, we'll run it through PD for a detective scanning and notification of the owner. It's really been a group effort. Hasn't really been a huge impact, so it remains in Public Works. I don't see any issue. Pickup times, usually it's picked up same day. If it's on a weekend, I know public safety may help out if it's a hazard, they'll get truck off the roadway on the side. And you can have staff come and get it maybe that following day. I think it's the biggest day of the week, Saturday through Sunday, but. Is there anything else to add on that, Brian?
Yeah, disposal goes to the county landfill. We have an agreement with the county landfill for taking dead animals. If there's large animals such as deer, we do have, to prearrange that, to bring it out so that there's no surprises at the working phase. Other than that, it's just pretty smooth operation. Typically refuse handles it, but there are times where street section staff or others will get involved, park staff, to pick them up if need be.
and a quick question, if they do have a microchip or for identification, then does that when you bring them out to us to hold them? I see you brought one to us since you've been doing this, so,
Yeah, I've seen one vaccine.
yeah. You do have that in your contract
Yeah.
also for us to hold if we get a DOA animal.
So that way you can get it back to the family.
Yeah, we'll hold it for
Yeah,
3 days.
domestic, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I just didn't know if that's what we were still
I,
doing.
I
There
think,
just is not that many domestic
Most of wildlife.
diseased animals on the roadway.
Mhm.
We run across just a few.
Okay, thank you, guys. So quick for next steps, we will have another meeting scheduled. My thinking is I'd like to bring back, I've got some numbers from having talked with Christie. We can maybe work with Waterloo and see if we can get some more details on how they're set up, or maybe somehow get some insight on their program, how it's run, maybe have them come speak, something like that. But that's my thinking, is just bring some more information on all the options. Maybe we even look at on our end, hearing everything today, are there some maybe recommendations we would say, if we kept it, here's how we would do it? And just bring all of those thoughts and options back to everyone so that we can start reviewing what would be a recommendation for the best route forward, and probably as best as we can, some cost estimates on what each of those directions would look like from a budget standpoint. That sound amenable to everyone? Okay. Otherwise, if anybody has any last thoughts before we open up for some public comment, give a few minutes there. All right, otherwise, would anyone from the public like to say a few words?
My name is Luann Cool. I live in Cedar Falls. I'm proud to live in Cedar Falls. I asked Danny if I could speak, but I've certainly learned a lot since I've been listening to everyone. The only thing that I would like to say is, in my profession, my boss, a pathologist in the hospital lab, when I was a director, he would say to me, Luann, you need to do what only you can do. Chief Howard's people need to do what only they can do, which is to protect us citizens. They shouldn't be animal control officers. I don't know, you can think about that. I think Steve Howard has gone, from what I've heard today, with his people, have gone to extensive lengths to make this work. He seems to be really have an interest in it, has worked hard to make it work. But it seems that maybe it could be done better if his people did what only they can do and Christie's people could do what only she can do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Luann. Anyone else for public comment?
Yeah, my name is Bruce Ernest. I've had over 40 years of animal control and animal rescue experience across the country, across the state. I've worked for both Cedar Falls and Waterloo Animal Control. We used to do patrolling in Cedar Falls. We used to be proactive from dogs running it loose, prevention. But we're not spending, but going up and down alleys and streets to see if dogs are, being left out for hours and days at a time. A lot of that stuff has gone by the wayside, obviously, as we've gotten busier. And when it first came out that the city was going to take over animal control, I was completely in support of the city doing it themselves from the standpoint that it was ridiculous the amount of money for the size of the city that you have. But the part that concerned me is if the city of Cedar Falls is going to continue to do it, I just don't think that an hour of training is anywhere near adequate I support the police department, I support the fire department, but they spend hours a day training, doing their job. They go to the police academy, they go to fire training, they have an FTO for several weeks to make sure that they're doing their job correctly and safely. There's no one out there that's helping them, monitoring them, training them on how to do the job. I do part-time work with Animal Rescue League of Des Moines. Mostly they're large cruelty cases across the state, but I do fill in for animal control. They take their officers for weeks at a time. I've helped train some other officers, everything from reading body language of an animal. My concern is that, especially as the officers that don't want to do it, and an animal can sense that, an animal can sense that they don't feel comfortable. And my concern is an officer is going to get hurt. And if an officer gets bit on a trigger hand, that's their career. And I just would like to see the city invest in, if they're going to keep it, invest in actual serious training. I agree with Christy, and I'm here to support Christy from the standpoint, animal control is a profession. It's just like a police officer, it's just like a firefighter, it's just like anything else that we do. And I think if it's either gonna go with Christy, she has the people and she's gonna probably send those people. They already have animal experience, but I've gone through Animal Control Academy. It's weeks at a time. It's everything, like she was saying, it's the laws, it's handling. It takes time to learn how to handle not only a wild animal, but a domestic animal. And every situation is different. And like I said, my biggest concern is I just feel that an hour is not enough time to train. And I know Christy had mentioned, and I think she hit it on the head, that they're never going to get good at what they do if it just spends a little bit of time doing it once in a great while. I would like to see if it's also going to stay with the police department, that they have people on each shift. I know that they have to dispatch people to wherever they're closest and those kind of things, but at least having more knowledge of animal control. So at least they have somebody to go to on each shift saying, hey, can you come over, call them, versus always having to call Christy. I don't know what compensation Christy or Cedar Bend has gotten from that standpoint, but be called at midnight. She's told me PD's called me at midnight, and at some point she needs to be able to put her phone down and not have them calling her 24/7, 365 for support. I commend her for doing that, and I commend the city for taking on a task that they're already doing fire and police. and now they're doing a whole other profession.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, otherwise, anybody else, last comments, thoughts before we wrap things up? We'll have all the notes get put together for the meeting, but then we'll also get some of the next steps out in that scheduling for the next meeting, so. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to come out, and again, just quick, want to say appreciation to staff. I know you were saying this was dropped on us pretty last minute last year with a pretty significant cost increase that I think anybody would have looked at and said, we just gotta bring this in and look at doing it ourselves, and I think it's just the right time for us to, we talked about doing a 6-month review to sit down, look at how it's going, and just see if we making sure to commit to, like you were saying, Christy, I think this community is one that's always said, we want to be pet friendly, we want our residents to know we're pet friendly, and this is one of the key things we do to make sure we're actually pet friendly, so thanks everyone for making the time.
Yeah.
Meeting is adjourned. So moved.